Hey everybody, you're listening to Raw with Marty Gallagher and JP Bryce on ICTV. Today we're discussing the myth, Sergio Oliva.
Oh, yes.
For anyone not familiar with Sergio, he was born in Cuba,
Yep.
came to the US in 1962 where he
Yep.
began a competitive bodybuilding career that lasted until 1985. During that time, he won many bodybuilding competitions in various federations, including three consecutive Mr. Olympias from
Yep.
1967 to 1969.
Yep.
He was an incredibly strong guy with thickness that was really ahead of his time. In fact, writer and bodybuilder Rick Wayne began calling him the Myth
Mm.
after the 1967 Montreal World's Fair, where most people that observed his physique that day couldn't believe what they were seeing. It was just so massive.
Oh, he was the freak.
So Sergio had a very interesting past in how he grew up in Cuba, ended up coming to the U.S. So Marty, talk a little bit about his background and how interesting it was.
Well, I think first off, JP, I want to say that, you're not going to hear us talk about a lot of bodybuilders because, bodybuilding to me is form without function. I like the athletic element
Right.
integrated into the strength training. So it's not, I mean, of the bodybuilders that we are interested in, you have, of course, the old time guys, the Bill Pearls, the Reg Parks, the Marvin Etters, you know, I, Arnold certainly, Robbie Robertson, of course. But past that, I mean, you got who is interesting. I think Lee Priest for sure. I think you would agree with that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think Lee might be the greatest short bodybuilder of all time. I, you
Right.
know, I don't mean to say that, in any kind of derogatory sense. Let's say vertically challenged.
Yeah, well, he was incredible. I mean, he had incredible mass,
Yeah,
and he
right.
was. But I think the reason why, we talk about a lot of the earlier guys was because they were the pioneers.
Yeah,
Um, you know,
yeah, they didn't seem. I don't know. The modern guys seem like inflated or something. Anyway, I don't want to riff on the modern guys, but I think Lee Priest for sure. Dorian, of course, right?
sure.
Ronnie Coleman. I think Ronnie Coleman deserves to be in that group because he is a strong dude, man. He trained down there at the Metro down there in Texas with all the hardcore guys. I mean, Ronnie Coleman's genuinely a strong guy in the modern era. Well,
But that, but
his era.
he started out in powerlifting.
No, actually he started out as a very good college football player. Right. I can't remember. I think it was Grambling. I can't think of Grambling. One of the premier black colleges he played for, and he was one of the nation's leading natural bodybuilders. And when he jumped to the IFBB, certain things had to change, but he had an incredible physique before any kind of enhancements even entered the scene. So when he did get enhanced, he just exploded, right?
Yeah.
And let's loop back to Sergio. I think Sergio was like that premier kind of guy. Okay, he was in. He was born in Cuba in 1942. Okay,
1941, I think.
41. I like that. Good. You've been doing your homework. Good. Excellent. And the Fidel Castro overthrew Batista in, I believe, 55. Okay.
Yep.
Once the Castro took power, he aligned himself with the Soviets. So all of a sudden, the Russians were coming into Cuba and said, "Hey, you know what? you guys have a lot of really good genetic specimens here, and you should like check them out and groom them for your Olympic teams, because we think it's very important that socialist countries like the Soviet Union and East Germany and Cuba do really well at the Olympics, because that will show how decadent and weak and pussified the capitalist countries are, right?
Yep. Yep.
They took that seriously. And because of that, they put all the power of a centralized totalitarian government behind that. And Cuba, what that meant is they sent out squads of coaches to like the elementary schools, and they'd be looking for like genetically superior children.
Wow.
And they might go, now, this genetically superior child, their physicality is more for swimming or volleyball, and this particular genetic type is more for shot put, right? Based on the physical archetype. And they had done this starting in the Soviet Union, but then it spread to the Iron Curtain countries in Europe, and then to the kind of colonized countries like Cuba and Vietnam, places like that. So Sergio Oliva was plucked out of obscurity because he had great genetics, and he was placed into the Cuban weightlifting system, but he was not a really dedicated guy, in the sense that he was more of a free spirit. So he ended up as a beach guy, but still, and again, I don't have the timeline in front of me. He ended up on the Cuban national team, right? Well, actually, he placed second at the Cuban Nationals. The winner incurred an injury. That allowed Sergio to be the Cuban 198-pound lifter, the Cuban representative at the Pan Am Games, and he bolted.
That was held in Jamaica. I think it was called the Central American and Caribbean
Central
Games.
American. It wasn't the Pan Am, it was the Central American. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So they got them all at the hotel with it, and they've got like the KGB agents, and they've got the Cuban secret police goons that travel with the team. Because if they don't, they're all going to run away.
Yeah. So he bolts past them.
Oh, he runs like a rabbit. I mean, this guy is fucking, he's fast, right?
And
he's fast, right?
And off to the American consulate he goes.
And they're chasing him, right? They're chasing, where are they at? They're in Jamaica.
Yeah, Jamaica.
And so they're running past all the Rastafarians going, go, brother, go, and here comes the KGB and the goons. And so he makes it somehow to the American consulate, and he gets political asylum.
Right.
But the punchline is that like by the end of the weekend, Sergio's example, there were like 60 other members of the Cuban delegation that defected.
Yeah, I think they all bolted and went to Miami.
Yes, and God bless them. And they probably are the central core of the modern Cuban community down there. God bless them. So anyway, Sergio, he ended up in Miami as a political refugee, and he somehow got a job, and they got a heavy Cuban community there, and he ended up as his job as a TV repairman.
Right.
But back then, I remember my father. I mean, you would call a TV repairman, and the guy would come out in a uniform with like a toolbox full of tubes,
Right.
He'd get in the back of your TV and he'd pull this vacuum tube out, put that vacuum.
Yeah.
All very mysterious, right? All very mysterious for the 3 channels we got: ABC, NBC, CBS.
Right. Now there's no fixing them. You just throw them out.
Yeah, and I mean, you had a 300-pound console with a 12-inch screen.
Right.
Right. Black and white, right? And everyone's crowding around it. You're watching the Beatles on Ed Sullivan in 1963. So that was the time that Sergio, I mean, he gets from Miami, he gets the brilliant idea that being a tropical person, he should move to Chicago.
Yep, that's where he ended up.
It's like, what was he thinking? I suspect there was probably a woman involved. He was always very popular with females.
Right.
He was a good-looking guy, and he has an extrovert personality.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So somehow he ends up in Chicago, and he gets a job in the stockyards, like killing cattle, standing outside in February, you know what I mean, in minus 18 degrees temperature, and doing that for 10 hours a day, 6 days a week at minimum wage, because he's a Cuban immigrant and doesn't speak any English.
Then he starts, I think he did something in a steel mill for a while too.
Oh yeah, there was this, I think that might have been the first job, actually. Yeah, he gets a job in a steel mill, and he's running around in 150 degree temperatures with molten, dodging molten steel falling on the concrete floor for $2.83 an hour, right?
And then while he's doing that, he's working a full-time job. He finds the YMCA.
Yeah, the Duncan Y. This is a very mysterious thing. There was a very influential and smart guy named Bob Gaida. And Bob eventually ended up as the AAU Mr. America. He was serious. I saw him in Washington, D.C., put on a posing exhibition in 1968. And he was a good-looking guy, 5'6", 190 pounds, 28-inch waist, kind of slim, small-built guy. But I think he had a doctorate. And I don't think it was any kind of jive thing. I think it was a serious thing, like, I don't know, whatever. But anyway, he got some sort of a directorate position at the Duncan Y, and he kind of turned it into a hardcore place. And all of a sudden, Sergio starts showing up there. And of course, Bob Gaida, being a bodybuilder, he looks at this guy and he goes, "Hey, you know what? Have you ever considered bodybuilding?" And Sergio's like, "Oh, what is this bodybuilding you're speaking of?" Because Sergio's, he's not of that world, and Gaida introduces him to that world, and they go into the AAU, the Amateur Athletic Union, which is where Gaida competed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Sergio kept running into the color wall.
Yeah, back then.
Because this guy was light years ahead. I mean, even when he was just doing Olympic lifting, before he even started, he was just naturally perfect.
Right. And by the way, in '63, I think when he really started competitive bodybuilding and really getting into bodybuilding, he was 22, so he was almost a late bloomer with that.
Well, with bodybuilding, he was for sure. But but if you were to construct a bodybuilder, the perfect bodybuilder, I would suggest that you do this. First, you would find a youngster with a perfect skeletal frame. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Well, I think you want to have wide shoulders, small waist, narrow hips,
small joints.
I think you want to be big boned. Sergio had 8 1/4 inch wrists.
Mm.
It was a strange combination. He had really good symmetry, but he was thick boned. Pearl sort of hinted at that, so did Reg, but Sergio was like, he was way ahead of them. He had way wider shoulders, a way smaller waist. Supposedly, and I don't know if this is a fact, you know how it goes, but supposedly at his peak, he had a 29-inch waist and 29-inch thighs.
Well, his thighs actually grew past his waist because,
oh my God,
from what I read, I mean, he had, at one time, he had a 28-inch waist with 32-inch thighs. So his thighs were bigger than his waist.
No. Okay, now.
He was built like you.
No. I got to call bullshit on that. I'm sorry. No 32-inch thighs. I know what 32-inch thighs look like. That's Kirk Karwoski territory.
Yeah.
That's not Sergio territory.
Sergio, I don't know. He was
I do.
Thick monster.
I do. And I'm telling you, it's a different league. Okay. Kirk was a rhinoceros. Okay. Sergio was the animal kingdom. It's like he was like a panther.
Yeah.
A really big, muscular panther. He was so athletic and smooth in his movement, naturally athletic. Again, this is a guy, he snatched 303, pressed 303, and cleaned and jerked 396, weighing 195 pounds.
Yep.
And he was 5'9". It wasn't like he was, 5'2". He was a tall, lean guy. He was an international level Olympic lifter. And then he got into bodybuilding. And I would posit that might have been the ideal background for a perfect bodybuilder.
I think you're right. You build that foundation. You do the heavy lifts, the compound lifts.
With the huge range of motion that they use in the squats. And again, the man put 400 pounds overhead, weighing a double body weight, weighing 195 pounds at 20 years old. Come on, that is genetics. Right?
Well,
that ain't like you won the chin-up championship of your high school, in 1972. This is a different league. And then this guy decides to take up bodybuilding. And then allegedly he got introduced to some juice, right? And he just blew up. And he went from 195, his first jump in body weight was from like 195 to 215.
Mm-hmm.
And when he went to the AAU weighing 215, he was crushing those white boys. They were pissing themselves, and they should have. But guess what? Guess who kept winning?
He did.
No, they did. The white guys, because
of the barrier
AAU,
there. Yeah.
They had this whole Mr. America. Well, what constitutes a Mr. America? And they tried to model it like the Miss America, and they'd have things like interviews with the judges, and you'd have to have athletic points, and they'd have points for grooming. Who the hell determines grooming? So here comes Sergio wearing gold shark skin pants with Cuban heels and a tank top in February, with a pompadour, barely talking English, and they go, there's no way we're ever going to let this guy win Mr. America, even though he crushes everybody else, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, and so here, and then Weider is trying desperately to get the IFBB traction. And their first Olympias were won by Larry Scott, a very good guy. I think Larry Scott had a great physique. But now Larry was kind of at the end of it. Now they needed a new champion. And, all of a sudden Sergio was at 215. And so, how about, Sergio, what if you get IFBB? Okay, boom. Takes it to the next level. Now he's 225. And he competes in his first Olympia, and he just mows people down. He's 225. Honestly, I think he's like 5'9", right?
Yeah, he is 5'9", 5'9", 5'10".
Yeah, I met him a couple of times. He's just a hair. I'm a legitimate 5'10". He's a hair shorter than me. But I saw him when he was older. When you're younger, you might be a little bit taller.
Now, where did you run into him at? Was it when you were at Muscle and Fitness?
When I was working for Muscle and Fitness, I was at, what was it, the anniversary? I was at the 30th, or I can't remember. I think it was the 30th, 67, 77, 87. I think it was like the 25th anniversary of the inaugural Olympia. And so at that Olympia, I think it was like 1992 or 3, it was, I think, one of the Atlanta Olympias. They had a reunion of all the Olympia winners. And so they had Larry Scott, and they had Sergio, and then they had Arnold, and then who was after Arnold? Franca? Was it? I can't remember. Anyway, and down the line, Samir, and, Chris Dickerson, and Frank Zane, and, Colombo. Blah, blah, blah. And Joe was there, and Joe went down the line. And I was the top correspondent for Muscle and Fitness. I'm sitting in the front row. Joe, so he goes to every Olympia winner, and he gives a little commentary, right, on the guy. So he gets to Sergio, and he goes, when you're in shape, nobody could beat you. And he looked at Arnold, and Arnold goes, yeah, that was right. Sergio was in shape. He was the king, and then Sergio said, yeah, too many pastries.
Now, Arnold once said that Sergio was in a class by himself.
Yep.
And he was the only bodybuilder that ever intimidated him.
Yeah. Yep. Yep, that's right. And you know why?
Why?
Because he was so overwhelming. He was so far ahead of anything we had seen at that point in time. Right?
Yeah, he really was.
He was like the first guy that was, but Sergio was weird for all his size. Bill Pearl was a big guy. Mm-hmm. Bill Pearl didn't have a damn cut on his legs. You look at Bill's photos. I love Bill, but he was not a lean guy. Sergio was. Sergio had striations.
Yeah, he did. I'm looking at a picture now, and he's got some great striations in his thighs. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, he was. So he had so he was like the first freak. He was like the first guy, and here's this guy, and he's like, oh, this guy is too big, and the young guys are going like, no, he's not. We love this guy. This guy's like a superhero comic book dude come to life.
And he was a volume trainer.
Oh, yeah. Once he got into bodybuilding, he loved to train, and he loved to be in the gym environment, and he got a lot of, positive feedback. Oh, there's Sergio, you know what I mean? He was the king any time he was in the gym. So I mentioned that Jeff Everson, who I consider a friend, Jeff was at Muscle and Fitness, and then he, of course, at Planet Muscle. Jeff was a real athlete, right? Jeff, in addition to being a PhD, collegiate snatch record at 325. I mean, the guy had, 600-pound bench. It was the real deal. Jeff told me one time, he said, back in the day, he saw Sergio training at the Dunkin' Wine. He said, well, what was he doing? He said, I only trained for an hour and a half. He said, but while I was there, he said, I saw Sergio do, he said, I counted him. Obviously, he said, I was watching him. He did 15 sets of benches and 15 sets of chins. I don't know if it was wide grip to the front or to the back. 15 sets of 15 reps in the bench with 245, and I think it was body weight in the chins. I was like, God damn. And that was just, I mean, Jeff left. Sergio had been going before Jeff got there and was continuing after Jeff left.
You know what? I think a lot of guys become volume trainers because they just love being at the gym.
Yes.
They just love to train. Not because maybe they think that's the only way that they're going to grow. They just love the experience.
Yes.
You know,
it's psychological. And they get that reaffirmation because everyone there is like, God, you are a god. And you know what? They are.
Yeah.
You are.
Well, you know what?
Jesus
you know what?
Christ.
It becomes
God,
like family there. It's like going home.
Yes,
so it becomes real comfortable.
Yes.
That's your passion. So, but yeah, so he was a volume trainer, and he would, he was training
5-6 days a week.
5-6 days a week,
3 hours a session minimum, and just doing a lot of sets, a lot of reps, and heavy weight. I mean, the guy was strong, man.
Yeah.
And he could pump himself up. I mean, that was his thing. See, when he started out, he was if you're an Olympic lifter, you're a low rep dude.
Mm-hmm.
So what would stimulate a low rep dude maximally? We'll get into a bunch of high rep stuff with a lot of carbs, and he just blew up. I mean, at his peak, when he was competing at the Olympia at 240, I mean, it's like, oh my God, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and in Germany, I mean, at his peak, it was like nobody could handle that dude.
And I think during that time, he was actually a police officer in Chicago, so he was doing that.
He always had a day job. I think he's, while Arnold was sunning himself, like Arnold had his 2 session a day sessions in Santa Monica, interspersed by naps on the beach where he was getting massaged by beach nymphs, and after he'd stuffed himself at the diner on, pie and milkshakes, meanwhile, Sergio was pounding a beat in Chicago in February in -3 degrees weather, beating up drug dealers.
Right.
Right?
Imagine him getting a hold of you. Yeah.
I mean, the contrast is incredible. Sergio Oliva, during his entire bodybuilding career, worked a damn day job, and these were no sissy day jobs, people. He was a TV technician. That was the easiest. But what was after that? He was a stockyardman. Then he got to be a butcher. He got to work in a steel mill. That's wonderful. Then he had like 20 or 25 years on the Chicago police force, but he wasn't at no damn desk job.
Yeah, and on top of all that, he was a volume trainer. So, I mean, my God.
May we add one note? Sergio was extremely popular with females to the point that his wife at one time shot him. Was it 3 or 5 times with the .38?
Yeah, that's a red red. Yeah, shot him in the chest, right?
Yeah, he survived.
And he was so thick. It's almost like he had
don't say that. Don't say that. Yes, he flexed his pec muscles and it didn't penetrate.
Yeah, but that's a lot of beef to go through.
Oh, stop it.
It's like he had a vest on.
He was a sharp dresser.
Yeah, he was. You look at his pictures online, and he's always got a hat on and nice button-down shirt. And I love that picture. I love that picture of him standing there with the pool stick.
Yes.
And the guns just busting out of the shirt. It's a great shot.
Let me tell you about that. That shot was taken at Don Peters' house.
Who's Don Peters?
Don Peters had a successful career as I think he was a film cinematographer. Mm-hmm. So he had a good job in a nice house, and he was a friend. He was a competitive bodybuilder, and he was a friend of this up-and-coming Canadian dude who had recently moved to the West Coast named Joe Weider. Yeah. So Weider got Sergio to come out to the West Coast, and they said, hey, let's go to by Don Peters' house. And if you'll note in those photos, they're around the pool table. And it's the pool table at Don Peters' house, and there's Eddie Gugliani. He's there, and they're looking, and Sergio walks in, and he's got a little tiny hat on top of his little tiny head, on top of this gigantic body. He's wearing a gigantic gold watch. He's got on some sort of custom-made iridescent seersucker top. You know, it's like form-fitting with like V cuts in the sleeves. And he's got pants on that looks like he should be in the Temptations.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, with the Cuban heels, and then they're all gawking at him, and he's beating the shit out of them in pool, and you know they're like, you know, where are all the women, you know?
Yeah, well, it's a great shot. I mean, there's so many great shots. You did an article that's on our website here. The name of the article is Real Genetics, but we've also got a picture of him in his cop uniform.
Yep.
And he even looks sharp as hell in that thing.
Again, you know, he'd put in the hours a day, and he was on the street.
Yeah.
You know, in whether he was in uniform or undercover. He did it all, and he had a good career as a police officer. He died early at, I think it was 72.
No, he died in 2012.
How old was he though?
Oh, I'm sorry. He was 71.
71. Okay,
yeah,
close.
Yeah.
I think he was the first Olympia to die.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, who knows? That's. But you can't bitch with living to 71. I mean, that's a good run.
But what's interesting too is his legacy lives on now. His son Sergio Jr. is now IFBB pro.
I don't follow any of that. I don't.
I know you're in the past, but presently.
Exactly.
No, he's
belligerently.
Yeah, but his son looks like he has a bright future, and of course he's got great genetics too, and looks great, and so he's an up-and-comer. It looks like
he won't stand a chance.
You don't know that.
Yes, I do. I predict that right now.
How do you predict that?
Because he won't. I don't want to get into this territory, but there's a certain look that's in vogue now.
Yeah, but have you seen him?
Yes, I have. And I think he's got a very beautiful, nice, kind of Flex Wheeler-ish physique.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what's in vogue. He'd have to put on 40 pounds of beef to compete with these guys. I mean, these guys look like the Incredible Hulk. He looks like the Incredible Hulk's girlfriend.
Well, I think he's got to get a bigger gut on him, too.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And I'm saying, why? Why do you want to do that? I mean, you're wonderful the way you are. Your father would be proud.
You know, Arnold just talked about that, and he said the judges were to blame for the way that, they're
the
judging
judges are always to blame.
Yeah, now these guys are just out of control, and it's, it's not artful like it used to be.
No, really, no shit. Oh my God, when did artful go out? You know, a lot of people would say that artful went out in bodybuilding when the vacuum pose stopped being a quasi mandatory.
Who does the vacuum anymore?
Oh, they can't.
They can't do it, right?
There's no way. So anyway. Anyway, we could go on all day. Do we need to do anything more in Sergio?
I wish I could still do the vacuum, but
I'd like to see that.
That's another
No, I
thing.
don't. I don't want to see that.
I try, but it doesn't. It's not what it used to be. I'll tell you that.
All right, can I buzz off? I've got to.
You got to just wait a minute. We can't.
Okay, all right.
We just
well,
can't cut.
We
just.
Can we cut in between here? Because
You're so pushy all the time.
No, I'm not. It's not a matter of push. I've got to use the bathroom.
Okay. I get it. You're like 85 or something over there.
Oh.
All right, listen.
You know, it's like the
All right.
the cat song. The first cut is the deepest.
Right. Well, listen. Anybody wanting to find out more about Sergio Oliva, we've got a great article on ironcompany.com. Just go up to the article section at the top of the page. Click on that. It's a few pages back now, but the name of the article is Real Genetics, and you'll see a picture of him doing a double bicep on there. And you can also check out Marty's weekly column and podcast, Raw with Marty Gallagher, at ironcompany.com. Article's link is at the top, and then if you go down to the bottom, you'll see the podcast link. We're not doing this by video anymore or live. I was tired of sounding like I'm calling from the Jack in the Box drive-through, so we kind of took the next step and got a little bit more professional.
JP, it was impossible. It was not your fault. It was on our end here in Pennsylvania.
and by the way, if
your old neighborhood.
Anybody that wants to get a laugh, check out some of the videos that we did in the past. There's all I call it "Where's Waldo?" If you can find Waldo, there's people crawling, doing the bear crawl past Marty, trying to sneak by. It's great. Marty's also available for online training and seminars.
Yep.
You can reach him by going to the athletes page at ironcompany.com. And for any of you gym owners, garage gym enthusiasts, if you need bumpers, flooring, racks, cardio, anything, please check us out at ironcompany.com for all your fitness equipment needs. And also Kirk Kowalski's Power.
Kirk Bar.
And you guys are using it in your videos now, your tutorials.
Oh, everyone's setting personal records right and left on that blue bar.
That's right. So.
It's just every time you touch it, whatever you've been handling increases 20 pounds.
Great. That's a great commercial. All right. Thank you. Great time as usual.
And Sergio is the benchmark in terms of true genetic greatness. You know what I mean? Sergio is like a Bo Jackson, a Wilt Chamberlain, a Jim Brown. You know what I mean? He was once in a decade, once in a generation, once in a half century kind of guy that found this calling, but he never quite fulfilled that potential, JP.
Well, I totally agree. He was in a different time. He was a pioneer. But not only did he have great genetics, he's got a very interesting background in where he started out, how he came to America, and just what he did to get through the day and support himself and his family, and then did bodybuilding on the side at night.
Yeah, and look him up on Wikipedia and look him up on YouTube. He's too great to be forgotten. And you look at his physique today, and you go, God damn, that is like the most incredible. I don't want to say natural because I don't want to say, but it's like human physique or something. It's the ultimate in symmetrical beauty. Past where he was, it seemed to get I don't know, just
robotic almost.
Yeah.
Anyway,
we gotta go. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye.
All right, boy.